chemistry. So yan, record natin. Okay, so welcome sa first topic. This is on the review of your Gen Chem. No? So we'll understand the history of organic chemistry, the electrons, how bonds are formed, and what are the properties that we can obtain uh, on the basis of their structure. No? Sige. So, unahan natin si organic chemistry with just a short history. No? Kasi before, there is a distinction, meaning may separation between organic compounds and inorganic compounds. No? When you say organic compounds, ito yung mga compounds that are naturally existing no, in plants or living organisms. No? Example, yung sugar. No? So yung mga example dati ng organic compounds. And then ang definition naman nila ng inorganic compounds, these are the compounds that exist in non-living things. No? So organic, living, inorganic, non-living things. For example, minerals, no? Stalactite, stalagmite, mga bato-bato, no? Asin, so on and so forth, yung water. No? So yun yung idea, no? There is a distinction between the inorganic and the organic world. No? And the force, no? And the thing that separates the two is the idea of vitalism. No? Okay, so what is vitalism? No? So according to them, ang organic compounds, these are formed no, because of this vital force. What is the vital force? They even don't know what that is. No? So hindi nila alam. No? Kaya sabi dito, mysterious yun. No? Sabi nila that organic compounds are formed through the help of that mysterious vital force. No? For example, nun, kunwari, gusto mo gumawa ng asukal, hindi mo kaya siya gawin. No? Kunwari, gusto mo gumawa ng glucose. Ito yung formula, di ba? This is the formula for making glucose. No? Photosynthesis formula. No? If we are going to do this, no? Ano pwede gawin dito? Yung tubig, bugahan mo ng hininga mo, no? Anong mangyayari? Wala, no? Ganun ka. Walang ma-form na sugar doon, no? So, yun yung idea nila, no? Na for you to create organic compounds, no? There should be vital force na hindi kaya gawin ng tao. So, that's why making organic compounds or separating organic compounds, no? Seems to be quite a tedious work, no? Mahirap daw gawin, no? See, whenever they try to isolate or purify organic compounds, what happens is that they usually decompose, no? For example, if you heat your your glucose, ano mangyayari sa glucose? Mangingitim. Sira na yung glucose, huling na lang siya. So yun yung idea nila before, no? That organic and inorganic are not the same, no? Because of this vital force, no? Only the vital force allows the creation of organic compounds. We cannot do that, so on and so forth. So that's the idea. But then, all like with any other old ideas, no, mga old theories, it should be tested, no. And yun, it was put into trial na test siya due to Friedrich Wöhler. Kasi, tama ba pag-pronounce ko? W kasi is V. O is U. So, yan, si Friedrich Wöhler. No? So, ano ginawa ni Friedrich? No? So, ganito ginawa niya. No? If there is a distinction, if there is a separation between inorganic and organic compounds, dapat hindi ka makagawa ng organic from inorganic. No? So, yun nga yung idea ng vitalism. No? Hindi ka makagawa ng organic from inorganic. Vice versa. Kasi may boundary. But, what he did is that, ginawa niya, ininit niya lang yung ammonium cyanate. This is found in fertilizers, no? Mga inorganic salts, no? So, yan. So, ang ginawa niya, when he heated ammonium cyanate, what happened is that it actually formed urea. Mabaho yung amoy niya, no? Bakit? What is urea? Ito yung nakikita sa ihe, no? So, yun. So, how come, nagpaisip sila, how come that you're able to form organic compounds from inorganic compounds, no? By just heating it, no? So, that actually tested the idea of vitalism, which was later on proved na hindi naman talaga nag-exist itong vitalism. No? So ano lang yan, uh, believe, ano yun, belief in the unknown. No? Parang naniniwala lang sila sa bagay na hindi naman nag-exist kasi hindi nila ma-explain. No? Parang religion. No? So yun yung idea. No? So yung vitalism, na-debunk siya because, yun nga, no? Hindi niya ma-explain paano nagkaroon nito from this. No? So yun. Then yun, maraming researches na silang nagawa which later on proved that you can make organics from inorganics, vice versa. You only have to use proper methods. No? So ano, instead of classifying organic compounds as compounds or molecules that come from living organisms, no, they just simplified its definition being the study or the chemistry of carbon-containing compounds. No? So, ganoon na lang ginawa nilang definition para mas broad, no? And mas acceptable, no? So, before, sabi nila, ano na yan, galing yan sa living organism, no? But this proved otherwise, no? Na hindi naman talaga siya galing. Hindi, pwede naman pala manggaling, no? Sa non-living organism, ang organic compounds. Hence, the redefinition of organic chemistry as the study of carbon-containing compounds and the inorganic chemistry being the study of molecules that lacks carbon, no? But not totally walang carbon. So yun yung history lang. And what can we observe here is that tingnan natin itong ayan, no? Kunin natin yung formula ng ammonium cyanide, no? So ang formula niya is N2H4CO. Kunwari lang. So, tingnan din natin yung formula ng urea. So, 2 nitrogen, 4 na hydrogen, carbon, may oxygen. Okay, so mapapansin nyo, they have the same formula. Ayan, naging question agad yan. No? Kasi dati, yung idea nila is one formula represents just one molecule, ammonium cyanide. No? Then, di nila alam na may kaparehas pala siya in terms of organic compounds, no, which is urea. So that's another question for them to solve, no. Sabi nila, how come that there are two formulas? There is a formula for different compounds, no? Hence the idea, hence the formation of the idea of the structural theory of matter. So ito yung ginawa nilang kasagutan. So according to the structural theory of matter, sabi dyan, substances are defined by specific arrangement of atoms. So it is possible na mayroong compounds na same formula but they just differ in their arrangements. Magkakaiba lang sila ng pinagdugtungan. No? So yun. For example, would be this one, ethanol, which is the alcohol that can be found in alcoholic beverages, yung masarap. And the dimethyl ether, pag ininom mo yan, patay ka. No? So yun, they have the same formula, C2H6O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, C2H6O, ito C2H6O then, no? So they have the same formula, but based on its structure, no? Sabi nga ng structural theory of matter, no? That they have the same number of connections na pwede nila gawin, no? For example, si oxygen, it can form 2 bonds, no? That idea is still retained with oxygen sa dimethyl ether, no? 2 bonds pa rin. That carbon can form 4 bonds, no? It can form 4 bonds. Ganun pa rin naman dito, no? So, ano lang yung pinagkaiba nila, no? What just happened is that the connections are now different, no? Si oxygen nasa dulo, ngayon nasa gitna ng dalawang CH3. Okay, so may tinawag sila dun, no? That if you have a formula but different structures, no? If you have the same formula for different structures, you call them constitutional isomers or just simply isomers, no? Constitution, meaning nun yung hindi yung Constitution ng Republika, rather yung structure, no? Constitutional isomers, structural isomers, no? So, yun yung idea. So, okay ba tayo dyan? Okay pa naman tayo?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Kala ko natulog na eh. So, yun. So, yun lang yung idea, no? So, balikan uli natin nangyari. Sabi nila before, there is a distinction between organic and inorganic, no? That you cannot create organic compounds because of this vitalism. That was put into test by Friedrich Müller. Sabi niya doon na, paano yan? Nagawa ko to. Ayun, nasira na yung vitalism, no? So instead, they redefined organic chem as the study of just carbon-containing compounds, and inorganic chemistry as the study of molecules without much carbon. So yun na, they redefined that. Then yun nga, niraise natin kanina yung concern that we have the same formula but for two different molecules now. So their answer for that is this structural theory of matter, no? That atoms can form certain number of bonds, no? As is yun, but the connections are just different, no? Ilipat mo lang yung isang atom sa kabila, ibang molecule na yun, no? Kaya guluguluhin mo yan, iba na yung identity, iba na yung pangalan din ng molecule na yan. So just that's the idea lang, no, for this part, no. And we call those molecules with the same formula but they differ in constitution or the structure. We call them constitutional isomers, no. Again, ito na yung question ulit, no. How can we know kung ilang bonds yung kaya gawin ng isang atom? How many bonds can an atom form, no? Ilan daw kaya? Ang sagot nila doon is the valence theory, no? Valence electrons, no? Okay, so you can actually look this up sa periodic table, no? And alam ko familiar na kayo with this one, especially when you discuss Lewis structures, diba? Okay, so we know that the valence electrons participate in forming bonds, diba? So yun yung idea. So ang pwede i-share ng atom na valence electron, it could vary from 1 to 4, no? So hence the term monovalent for those atoms who can only contribute 1 electron. For example, hydrogen and the halides, no? Fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, isang bond lang kaya nila gawin, no? So isa lang yung i-share nila. We have the divalent, meaning no, dalawang electrons yung pwede na i-share. Just like oxygen, no? It can form 2 bonds, no? For nitrogen, ganun din. It can form 3 bonds, trivalent. And kay carbon, it can form 4 bonds, no? And this is observed in nature. This can be found everywhere, no? So yun yung idea. That atoms can form certain predictable number of bonds depending on their valence electrons, no? Kung gagamitin nila or hindi, nasa kanila na yun, no? Okay, so with that, no, ibig sabihin lang, no, we can create molecules na ngayon, no. So we can draw isomers, no, of the following formula. Ano lang pwede gawin natin, no? Pwede natin palit-palitan yung connections nila, no? Bigyan ko kayong example, no. So for example, we have C3H8O. Ang pwede natin gawin muna dito is i-lista natin kung ano yung mga kakayahan nila, no? Ano yung mga kaya nila gawin. So carbon can form 4 bonds, hydrogen can form 1 bond, oxygen can form 2 bonds, no? Usually, pag organic compounds, di ba maraming carbon, ang pwede gawin dyan is pagdugtong-dugtongin natin sila. Ganun yung nangyayari, no? So, what I mean by that, no, is ang gagawin ko dito to make the first structure, first drawing para dito sa molecule na to, C3H8O, is pagdudugtong-dugtongin ko yung carbon. Pagdugtongin ko, ha. So, this is my first carbon. Tapos idudugtong ko dyan yung second carbon. And yung third carbon. Okay. So, yun yung idea. Usually sa organic chemistry, ganyan yung itsura, no? And magkakadugtong yung carbons natin. Okay. So, makikita nyo, no? Conserved yung idea ng valency. Kasi, look, isang electron yung shinare ni carbon dito sa kabila. Yung tatlong iba, no? Pwede nyo paggamitin sa ibang atoms. May mga atoms pa naman tayo, di ba? So, pwede nyo gamitin ng oxygen, pwede gamitin ng carbon, ay ng hydrogen pala, no? So, yun. Okay. So, ganun din dito sa carbon na nasa gitna, no? 4 yung pwede niya dugtungan. Yung dalawa, ginamit niya to bond with these 2 carbons sa gilid niya. Itong oxygen ay carbon na orange, no? It can form 4 bonds, no? But the electron is paired with the carbon na nasa left side niya. Okay, so next is gagawin natin, we're going to attach the hydrogens, no? Kahit saan dyan, okay lang, no? Sige. So, 8 yung ating hydrogens, no? So, punuin muna natin yung hydrogens ng blue, no? Okay, so sa blue, may 3 pang positions na pwede kabitan ng hydrogen, di ba? Okay. So, dito kay ko dudugtong yung hydrogens, no? So, dugtong ko dyan, NH. Dito, dugtong ko yung H. Dito din. So, ilan na ang gamit ko? 3. Ilan na lang natira? 5 pa. Sige. Dugtong ko din sila dito. Yan. Yan. Ilan pa? Mayroon pa akong pero yung 3 pa. Nawala sa bilang yan. No? Sige. Well, ako na rin dito, no? Hala, ano problema natin? Pag tinugtong natin yan dyan agad, yung oxygen, hindi natin nagamit, no? So, ano kaya pwede remedyo doon?
Tanggalin yung isang H.
Lipat ko muna yung isang H, no? Lipat ko. Ito, tanggalin ko to. Lipat ko iyan. Gamitan ko ng red. Dito ko idugtong yung oxygen, no? Tapos doon ko idudugtong yung H, no? Ayan. So, nagamit ko lahat ng atoms. Keeping in mind that their valency is still followed, no? Hydrogen formed one bond with the neighbor atom, no? Carbon formed 4 bonds with its neighboring atoms. Oxygen formed 2 bonds with its neighboring atoms, no? So, yan. So, pwedeng yung oxygen ko nasa dulo nitong carbon na to, yung blue carbon, no? Ano pa kaya pwede gawin natin? Pwede naman, kunwari wala lang, trip ko lang. Ayoko dyan. Ayoko nasa dulo siya. Pwede ko siya idugtong dito sa second carbon. Palitan ko lang tong H ng oxygen, tapos idugtong ko yung dugtong ko yung oxygen dito, no? So, yun. Teka lang. Ang ballpen gagamitin ko. Na-erase ko. So, pwedeng yung oxygen dito ko idugtong, no? Ayan. Dugtong ko yung hydrogen na pinutol ko. Okay. So, question. Is this compound the same sa kanina? Same ba yan dun sa yung oxygen nandito? Ito nasa gitna. Ang sagot doon ay hindi na, no? Kasi magkaiba na yung pinagdugtungan nila, no? Sabi nga natin dito sa previous slide, no? If they have the same formula, but they differ in the connection, they differ in the structure, they are isomers, no? Meaning nun, same formula, different structure, different connections, no? So, ayan. So, pwede ko idugtong yung oxygen dito, no? So, I created a new molecule, no? Okay? Ito question ko. Kunwari, ito question na. Kunwari gusto ko yung oxygen ko, ilagay ko dito. Gusto ko ilagay yung oxygen ko dyan. Bagong molecule ba to o na-draw na natin to? Is this a new molecule or nagawa na natin to previously? May kaparehas siya.
Same lang po.
May same lang siya. Saan siya same? Yung dun sa ginawa natin na yung oxygen.
Second.
Nandito. Yun, nandito sa blue. So remember, sulat drawing ko na lang yung ano. Teka lang. Pwede ko I need more space. Lipat tayo sa ano. Lipat tayo sa OneNote. Okay. Para makita natin. Draw natin lahat ng isomers na pwede, ha? Sige. So, ano yung formula? C3H8O. So, ito yung mga kaya gawin ng ating atoms. So, yung first drawing ko kanina is ito. Ayan, di ba? So, yung first drawing ko kanina is that the oxygen is bonded to the last carbon. To the last or to the first, no? Then, the second drawing that we created, no, is that yung oxygen, nakadugtong siya dito sa second carbon, no? And sabi natin, this is a different molecule because it is different in connections, no? Iba yung dinugtungan niya, eh, no? Ito first carbon. Ito second carbon, no? So, magkaiba yun, no? Eh, what if yun nga yung sinabi ko kanina? What if gusto ko yung nandito siya sa dulo? What if yun nandyan siya sa dulo? No? Sige, gawin natin. Okay, question. Bagong molecule kaya ito? O same lang siya dyan sa isa sa mga na-drawing natin?
Same lang po.
Same lang, no? Kasi ang ginawa lang natin dito, itong molecule na to is parang binaliktad lang natin na ganito, no? So, same lang yan, no? So, that's the idea, no? Ano pa yung pwede natin gawin, no? Saan pa pwede ilagay yung oxygen? Saan pa kaya? Balik tayo dito kasi colorful. Saan pa kaya pwede ilagay yung ano? Oxygen. Ay, nawala. Saan pa kaya pwede ilagay yung oxygen? Sa? Pwede sa gitna ng dalawang carbon. Pwede yan, ha? So, gagawin ko yun. Diba kanina, number 3. Ay. Ba tayo gumana? May battery naman. Oh, may pawis kasi. Wait lang, ha? Init dito sa kwarto. Number 3. Ay. Hindi kasi eraser pala yun. Ano ba yun? So, ano? Yung oxygen, pwede ko ilagay dito sa gitna, no? Pwede ko ilagay yan sa gitna, oh. Pwede yun. Try natin. Tapos tignan natin kung bagong molecule siya. So, carbon, carbon, oxygen, carbon. So, kumbaga, ang gagawin lang natin ngayong araw, mag-practice lang tayo ng drawing. Next week, mas maraming drawing yung papagawa ko sa inyo. So, yun. So, anyway, ano yung ginawa natin, no? Initially, yung ginawa natin is yung oxygen nasa dulo, nakaband yun sa hydrogen. Yung pangalawang ginawa natin, we moved that oxygen, no, para mapunta dito sa second carbon. Ayan, dinugtong natin siya dyan. Then, ngayon naman, ang isa ko pang ginawa ay yung oxygen ay dinugtong ko sa dalawang carbon. Okay? So, do you think this is the same as the previous structures? Same pa rin kaya siya? Same formula, yes, pero yung structure niya ay ibang-iba na compared dito, pati dito, compared sa dalawang yan. Iba na to. Kasi, if you can, as you can see, no, oxygen is now bonded to two different carbons, no. Okay. Okay, so yun yung idea. So, ano yung idea uli natin, no? We can form molecules, no, by just connecting them, no, according to their valence electrons, no, kung ilan yung kaya nila gawin, no. Tapos yun, we can make different molecules, no. Iba yung iba yung molecule na yung OH nasa dulo, iba yung molecule na yung OH nasa gitna, iba rin yung molecule na yung O nasa gitna ng dalawang carbon. So to be for you to be guided, no, ang name nito ay 1-propanol. This is 2-propanol. And this is methyl ethyl ether. Ayan, so methyl ethyl ether, no. So yun, so, sa future na natin malalaman kung paano mag-name, no. So each of those compounds, they possess different properties. Iba-iba yung kanilang boiling point, iba-iba yung melting point nila, iba-iba yung kanilang chemical reactivity, so on and so forth, no. So ano lang yung idea, no. So for now, ang gagawin lang natin, no, is that we will practice more on how to create isomers, no. How can we form different connections sa iba't ibang molecule, no. So yun, pagdudugtong-dugtungin natin sila para tayo magpo-puzzle. So we will try to connect different atoms, no, and try to see if we created different molecules, no. So, you have questions po ba? Okay pa ba kayo?
Wala po. Okay lang.
Wala pa naman. Okay pa naman. Sige. Practice pa tayo ng drawing, ha? Wait lang. Ayun. So, yun yung number 1. We can create 3 constitutional isomers for number 1. For number 1, we can create this. Pwede nyo ito i-screenshot, ha? That's a different molecule. Dito, by the way, ano ma-notice nyo? Ay, wala. Ang ma-notice natin is parang nagdodraw tayo ng Lewis structure, no? Because yes, nagdodrawing tayo ng Lewis structure. Yan. Basic Lewis structure, no? And then we can create another formula with this one, with this motif, or with this itsura. Okay. So, yan ang mga pwede natin magawa with all our atoms, no? We can create 3 isomers, no? And yun nga, pinangalanan natin siya. This is 1-propanol, 2-propanol, methyl ethyl ether, no? Ether yung tawag if yung oxygen sandwiched between dalawang carbon, no? Yan. Pag yung oxygen nasa gitna ng dalawang carbon, ether tawag doon, no? Yun lang, no? So, syempre, siguro ngayon pa lang, new pa lang yung idea sa inyo na ito. So, gagawa tayo ng isa pang, example, no? So, sige. Screenshot nyo muna. Then, continue tayo with number 2. No? Sige, number 2. Okay, so number 2. Gawin natin si number 2, C3H7Cl. Okay, so, ano yung mga valence electrons niya, no? So, carbon has 4 valence electrons, so it can form 4 bonds, no? Hydrogen can form 1 bond. Cl can form 1 bond then, no? Okay, so, yun. Ngayon, we have 3 carbons 7 hydrogens, 1 chlorine, no? So, try natin yung ginawa natin kanina, no? We connected all carbons muna, no? So, gagawin ko yon. I will connect carbon 1 with another carbon. Dugtong ko na naman yan. Then, isa pa. Then, anong pwede gawin? Yung hydrogens, ilagay ko na, no? So, start ako dito. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then, saan ko pwede ilagay yung Cl? Hindi dito na lang. Okay. So, yan. So, I am able to make one molecule which is the formula of C3H7Cl, no? So, yan. I placed all the carbons na magkakadikit and yung hydrogens and the chlorine atom ay nasa dulo. We call yung dulo terminals, no? So, yan. So, that's one way to draw this structure. Sige. Isip pa tayo. Saan pa pwede ilagay yung Cl?
Sa gitna po.
Sa?
Ay, sa pangalawang H sa baba. Pagpalitan lang po.
So, pwede ko rin siya ilagay dito, no? Yan. Ganon. Pagpalitin ko sila ng, dito na yung H na isa, dito na yung Cl. So, this is a different molecule. Kasi, the first molecule that we created, Cl is connected sa isang carbon, first carbon. This time, we connected Cl sa second carbon. Okay, so, magkaiba yun. Saan ba pwede? Or meron pa ba na pwede gawin? Or dalawa lang talaga yung kaya niya gawin? Can I place my Cl in between carbons?
No po.
No po.
Kasi
Isa
Cl
lang
can
Form po
only
siya ng dalawang
form
bond.
one bond. One bond lang kasi. So, yan lang. Sir, kunwari, may estudyante din ako. Sir, pag nilagay ko si Cl dito, different molecule ba yan? Yung kayo sasagot.
Hindi po.
Hindi po. Kasi it is the same as yung
Kanina
Cl
po
na
dito sa
nilagay
una.
dito sa unahan. No? Same lang yan. No? So, yan. So, this is the first carbon. Pag nilagay mo yung Cl dito, ito naman yung magiging first carbon. No? Yung counting, nagmamatter yan. No? So, yun lang yung idea natin. No? So, for number 2, we have two types of, ayan ba yan? We have two isomers for that formula. No? So, draw natin para mas kita. So, what are the two isomers for number 2? Tapos mamaya pangalanan ko. H. Nakakatamad mag-chord kasi ganito, no? Hindi may shortcut dito sa future. Okay, so these two are different molecules, but they have the same formula. We call this first molecule the 1-chloropentane. Ay, ba't pentane? Ethane, propane pala. The 1-chloropropane and this one, the 2-chloropropane. Susunod magpapangalan tayo. So, paano naging 1? Because chloro, yung chlorine, it is connected in the first carbon. Ganun yung counting. 1, 2, 3. So, nasa first carbon kasi. This time, sa kabila naman, no, the chlorine is connected to the second carbon. No? Okay, so ganun. Sir, may 3-chloropentane ba? Ay, propane. Wala, no? Walang 3-chloropropane. Kasi, if binaliktad mo yung counting, may 1 chloropentane din yung name niya. No? We always choose the smallest number. No? So, kunwari, dito ko dinugtong yung Cl. No? Kunwari dito. Kunwari, andyan yung Cl. So, pag nag-numbering tayo, dalawa kasi yan. Pwedeng to the right, pwedeng to the left. Then, mamimili tayo ng number na pinakamababa. So, this is 3, this is 1. We choose 1. And, di ba may 1 chloropentane na tayo? So, ayun. Yan lang yung mga ideas, no? But, in the future, we will understand this further, no? Mas mapapalawak natin yung understanding natin ng drawing, no? Sige. So, anyway, ano pa? Siguro, I will leave 2 items sa inyo, no? Kaya na bahala magsagot sa inyo. Pwede nun sa discussion tayo ng discussion sa Canvas, no? Ano pwede ko ibigay sa inyo? Siguro ito, 4, ito 3, bigay ko din sa inyo. So, kayo magdo-drawing nyo, no? Drawing nyo na sa pencil, sa iPad, ballpen, sa cellphone nyo. Kayo bahala, no? So, ito nagawa ko na. Ano pa? Siguro isa na lang. Ito naman, number 6, no? Gawin natin 6. C2. Cl3, F3, no? So, what do we know about C2? I see it can form 4 bonds. Cl can form 1 bond, and F can form 1 bond, no? Kasi fluorine and chlorine are halides. Nasa group 7 sila ng periodic table. And their valence electron is just capable to form 1 bond na lang. So, yun yung idea. Okay. So, as usual, may dalawang carbon ako. So, pwede ko pagdugtungin yung dalawang carbon. Okay. Then, yung Cl, pwedeng ganito. Diyan magkakasama sila. Tapos yung fluorine, andyan sila. Isang molecule yan. Okay? Pwede rin naman na pagpalitan ko ng pwesto yung Cl pati si F, no? Different molecule yan. Kasi magkaiba yung positions ng Cl and F ngayon, no? So, ganun. Ano pa pwede natin gawin? Pwede rin ito, no? Pagpalitin ko rin sila ng pwesto. Dito na lang yung F, dito yung Cl. No? So, iba na namang molecule yan, no? So, iba na namang pangalan niya. Pero, pag ito at ito yung pinagpalit ko na, hindi na pwede yan, no? Kasi, ano lang ginawa ko dito sa structure na yan? Binaliktad ko lang, no? So, yun yung idea. So, for number 6, I can create 3 isomers, no? Draw ko dito. F, 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 F yan. Ito F. Dito yung isang F. So, Cl. Piling ko 4 yung kaya gawin, no? Ay, nawala. Pangit na. Gulo-gulo na dito. Punta tayo sa sa OneNote. Parang mas draw. Ayan, C2. C2F3. Cl3. Okay. So, ano naman pwede ko gawin? Carbon, 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 carbon. Yung F, ito sila. Pagpalitin ko ng pwesto yung isa. Palitin ko ng pwesto yung dalawa. Then yun. Dito yung Cl, 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 Cl. Cl, Cl, and Cl. So yun no, magkakaiba yung pangalan nila. Paano magkakaiba no? Yun kasi sa first drawing natin, so sa first drawing natin, lahat ng chlorine nasa anong position? So paano tayo magbibilang dito no? So unahin natin yung may mas mabigat na atom na nakadugtong. So sino mas mabigat? Fluorine or chlorine? Ang sagot ay chlorine. So una tayo magbilang dito. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Kunwari ganyan na. So si chlorine sa first drawing natin ay nasa 1, 1, and 1. May tatlong chlorine sa first carbon. Si fluorine naman, sila lahat ay nasa 2, 2, 2. No? Okay, so ibang structure yan compared sa pangalawa because dito sa pangalawa, yung chlorine natin nasa 1, and nasa 2. Ito yung 1, ito yung isa pa, and ito yung pangalawa. So magkaibang pangalan, magkaibang properties. No? Si F ganun din, meron nasa 1, meron sa 2, meron sa 2. No? So yun yung idea. No? Yung counting sa future na lang natin malaman. So basta in summary, ano yung idea na pwede natin kunin, no? That we can create different molecules from the same formula, no? Just keep in mind the valence theory, how many bonds can they form, no? So sige. So yun, no? Anyway, nasundan niyo po ba?
Yes po.
Ha?
Yes po.
Okay. So, if hindi nasundan, pwede naman sabihin, tayong tatlo lang naman nandito. Okay lang. Huwag na magkahiyaan. Ay, ba't ayaw niya mag full screen? Ganun. Siguro may webcam naman kaya nga. Magpapadraw nga ako sa inyo. Draw nyo ito. Sino ba pwede? Nagawa na natin ito eh. Etong number 3. Try nyo i-draw yan. So, I will give you siguro mga 5 minutes no, to draw all the possible constitutional isomers for number 3. No? Tapos mamaya pakita natin yung solutions. So, mamaya papakita nyo sa akin yung picture, no? Use your camera. Tapos, titignan ko yung drawing niya. So, sige, bigyan ko kayo ng 5 minutes na para kunin yung number 3. bigyan ko kayong tip, no? Pwedeng hindi straight yung connection ng carbons. What I mean is, di ba, apat yung carbon. Pwedeng hindi isang straight na ganyan. Pwedeng ganito. Ayan, pwedeng ganyan. Ayan. Ayan lang ba? Opo, yan lang. So, yun na. Sige. Tapos mamaya pakita natin yung mga sagot. Hello. Ayan, no? Sino gusto magpakita ng answer? I-on nyo na lang yung webcam, tapos tignan namin. Kahit sino. Dalawa lang. Tatlo lang naman tayo. Na-draw nyo na ba, guys? Si Rika, kumusta pagdodrawing? Nika, kumusta na pagdodrawing? Sige, Rika, kumusta yung drawing?
Wait lang, sir. Di ko, sir, ma-project. Ang hirap mag-drawing sa paint pag naka-laptop po. Wait lang.
May gamit kayong pencil, ball pen. Ayan, no? Okay, so, according kay Rika, yan yung first structure, no? Wherein all carbons are dugtong-dugtong. No? So, yan. So, good yan. Okay, so ano pa yung isang isomer niya? Yung ikalawang isomer niya would be yung isa pa. Sige. So, draw nyo muna yung pangalawa. So, yung ginawa ni Rika sa una is that, ito, no? Ayan. So, all 10 carbons, all 10 hydrogens are placed around the straight chain of carbons, no? Sinikart naman dun sa ikalawang isomer.
Wait lang, sir. Share ko na
Sige.
lang yung screen.
Sige lang po.
Ano ba si?
So, ano yung pangalan ulit niyan, Rika? Ang pangalan niyan ay? View.
Sir, yan,
Okay.
sir. Kita po. Can you see? Sa right side. Kita niyo na po yung screen?
Hindi pa.
Wala.
Ala, we. Sandali.
Butane.
Ay, wait lang po. Ay,
Mag-share screen ka ba?
kita na po ba?
Ayan.
Ay.
So, yung una,
Yung una po yung kanina kay Rika.
so yan, ayan yung first, yung straight chain. Yung ikalawa is, ayun, no, yung isang carbon dumugtong sa second carbon. No? Ito question, pwede ba idugtong ko siya sa third carbon? Pwede ba ito idugtong ko sa third carbon?
1, 2. Ano idugtong, sir? Yung ano
Yung
po?
isang carbon?
Draw ko ah.
Wait po.
Di ba yung una yung ginawa is ito. Ay, hindi nyo pala nakikita yung screen ko.
Nag-off share na ako, sir.
Ayan. Ayan. So, yung unang ginawa natin, ninyo pala, no? Is ayan, di ba?
Opo.
So, tama yan. Ang pangalan niyan ay butane.
Butane.
Butane. Butane. Ito yung nasa lighter, pati sa LPG.
Opo.
Okay. Yung ikalawang ginawa nyo, you place your carbon on the second carbon. Tama naman yun. Ay, ala, nalipat. Ayan, no. Lagyan ko ng numbers para guided tayo. 1, 2, 3. Would it be possible for me to connect this circle group sa third carbon? Pwede ba idugtong ko na lang siya sa third carbon? Or same lang siya sa isa sa mga drawing natin? Pwede ba ito ilipat ko na lang doon sa third?
Sir, same lang po.
Same lang. No? So,
Sa
ganun yung mangyayari. Ha? Kasi, para makita natin. Kasi, if I place this carbon group, no, dito sa dulo, ang mangyayari nun, magiging butane lang din siya. No? Magiging ganun lang din siya. Ito yung third, ito yung fourth group. Nilagay ko sa kadugtong ng third. So, same lang. So, for this formula, I have two isomers, no? Namely, butane and 2-methyl propane, no? Which is also called isopropane. Isobutane pala. And the isopropane yung tama. So, yun.
Sir, paano ulit nakukuha yung name?
Yung name,
Opo.
ay yung pangalan, ano na yan sa future na, no?
Okay po.
Binibigay ko lang yung names na. Pero in the future, magiging ano na kayo, magiging familiar na kayo with the names, no? So, yun. So, yun. So, okay naman tayo sa isomers na po.
Yes po.
Opo.
Nasusundan naman.
Opo.
Sige, so salamat sa participation. No? At dahil dyan, next slide tayo. So siguro gawin nyo na lang, comment nyo na lang sa Canvas yung sagot sa 4 and 5. No? Actually, nag-google lang yan eh. So yun. Pero try to check no? Kung yung masagot natin is tama nga. So anyway, let's proceed. Yung drawing natin kanina, as you can see, between atoms, there is this thing, no? Itong bagay na yan, no? What is it called, no? Ano tawag niya sa bagay na yan?
Bonding.
It's bonding, no? Or more specifically, we call them covalent bonds, no? So covalent bonds are formed when two atoms share one electrons. No? For example, we have this drawing. Actually, share ko lang na that this concept is actually, to be fair, no, medyo recent lang siya. That's around 1910, no, nang ma-discover ni Gilbert Lewis yung idea ng covalent bonding. No? So, wala lang, share ko lang. Okay, so what happens is that if we have two atoms, ito yung mga valence electrons nila, when they come in contact, they can form, they can use those electrons to form bonds. No? Okay, so in this graph, we have energy, ito yung energy, yung nasa baba, low energy, nasa taas, high energy. No? Ito yung distance ng nucleus ng dalawang atom. No? So pag nandito ako sa red pointer ko, magkalayo yung aking atoms. No? But soon as they come closer, they form the bonds. No? And as we can see, no, na the energy is much lower if they form bonds than hindi sila bonded. No? So ano yung idea natin doon? Kapag hindi bonded yung electrons, mataas yung energy. Okay? But if they use it to form bond, they lower the energy. In chemistry and physics, lower energy means spontaneous process. Ang meaning ng spontaneous is that it will happen, no, naturally. Ibig sabihin, hydrogen and these two hydrogen atoms will naturally form their single bonds. No, gagawin talaga nila yan, no? Because it is lower in energy. No? So yun yung idea lang. So yun lang ang summarize natin. No? So as soon as the atoms are nearing each other, they are forming the bonds. No? Up to the point where the distance is optimal. No? Meaning ng optimal is yung sakto lang. However, if you draw atoms closer to each other, what happens sa energy? Biglang tumataas, no? Ano yung nangyayari dun sa pagtaas na yun? No? Ang nangyayari sa pagtaas na yun is that because their nucleus, remember the nucleus, it is positively charged, di ba? If you draw these atoms closer, wala pala akong camera, kamay ko galaw ng if you draw your atoms closer, what happens is that the positive nucleus repels to each other. No? Nagre-repel na sila sa isa't isa. And repulsion is the cause why there is a spike in energy. No? So parang magnet lang. At certain point, tolerable, stable sila. Ganun din, parang dito, nung sa drawing natin. At certain distance, stable sila. Pero pag dikitin mo yung dalawang magnet na matindi, magre-repel yan, no? Sasabog yan. No? So, the same is true for atoms. No? So, yun nga. So, what forces keep the bond at optimal strength, optimal length? Meaning lang no, yung distance, anong reason why there is a preferred distance for two atoms, no? As they form bonds is yun nga. Meron kasing attractive forces between their atoms and between their nucleus and electrons, and anything beyond that is magiging mahina yung forces or malakas yung forces. No? Pag pinagdikit mo masyado, the forces of the nucleus becomes much stronger, hence there will be a repulsion. Pag pinaglayo mo naman, nawawala yung attraction. No? Then there's an optimal strength when they form bonds. No? So in summary, ano yung gusto lang natin makuha dito sa slides na to? No? So ang gusto natin makuha ang idea is that electrons are used to form chemical bonds. No? And formation of chemical bonds is favored by nature because it will produce a system or a molecule which is lower in energy than its precursor. Ibig sabihin, mas mababa yung energy niya kaysa sa original version niya na isa sila ng electron. No? So, yun. That's the reason why we have bonds. No? And speaking of atoms, no, babalik na tayo sa Gen Chem. No? So, let's have a review about the atoms, no? The atom structure. What we know is that yung atoms natin, they contain protons and neutrons, and they are found in the nucleus, di ba? So, kunwari, ito yung protons, ito yung neutrons, ito yung electron. This proton, neutron, and electron. So, in the nucleus of an atom, we have protons and neutrons, no? Proton being the positive, neutron is the negative, no? And outside the nucleus, you have your electrons orbiting the nucleus, no? And we call the electrons, no? In the outermost shell, yung electron na sa pinakalabas ng atom, we call them the valence electrons, no? Valence electrons are the electrons in the outermost shell, and these are the electrons that are used in forming chemical bonds. No? Okay, so how do we predict the number of the valence electrons of atoms? No? We can do this by just simply looking at the group of your element. No? For representative elements, what I mean by representative is that they are in the s and the p orbitals. Ito yung s and p orbital. E nasa gitna kasi d and f na yun, di ba? Okay. So for representative elements, you can predict the number of valence electrons by just looking at their group number. So for group 1, they have 1 valence electrons, 2, dalawa, 3, tatlo, apat, lima, anim, pito, walo, until they form 8 now. Soon as they have 8 electrons, we can say that it will now follow the octet rule. No? Ito kasi yung gusto ma-achieve ng mga ito. No? And one way for them to achieve the octet is for them to have someone to share their electrons with. No? So that's why merong sharing of electrons just to fulfill the octet rule. No? Para mapunan yung mga pagkukulang sa iyo. No? Parang pag-ibig lang. Naghahanap ka ng mga bagay na wala sa iyo, sa iba. Mga ganong bagay. So anyway, ngayon, ang activity natin would be for us to draw the Lewis structure of our atoms. No? Ano kaya yung Lewis dot structure ng atoms? Okay. So when we say Lewis dot structures, we are pertaining to the atom being surrounded by electrons represented by dots. No? Unahan ko na yan. No? So to start with, for boron, tingin tayo sa periodic table, boron is the third element, di ba? I mean, hindi naman third element. It is in the group 3, no? Group 3 element yan. Oh, kung meron kayong periodic table with you, di maganda, no? So, gamit tayo ng periodic table. Ayan, no? Nasa group 3, itong hindi, iba yung niya. Ay, di ba ito yung first group, second group, ito yung third group, itong green, ayun, daming green. Basta itong apple green. So, boron is in the third group. So, it contains how many valence electrons? Edi, tatlo. No? So, may 3 valence electrons siya. The question is, how are we going to place those valence electrons sa ating Lewis dot structure? No? And according to Lewis, no, if you're going to write your electrons or to place your electrons, kailangan you do it on the sides of the atomic symbol. No? Meaning nun, lagawa kang imaginary box. No? Pag maglalagay ka daw ng valence electrons, one on each side first. No? So I'll have my first here, second here, and the third here. So in summary, the Lewis dot structure for boron would be 1, 2, 3. Yung mga tatlong dots. No? Familiar pa kayo dito, di ba? Ayan. For, yan, nagawa ko na yung 1. For bromine, bromine naman ako. Si bromine ay group 7. No? It is in the halide family. No? Sino-sino mga kasama niyan? Fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. Yun. No? So, 7 valence electrons siya. So, according to Lewis, you place your electrons around the atomic symbol first. No? One at each side. No? So, isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat. Ngayon, paano na yung tatlo? Okay, so, pag naging pag nakumpleto na yung apat, you can now pair those electrons na. So, pair na natin sila. No? Teka lang. Ayan, so, pang-apat, ay hindi, pang-5, pang-6, and pang-7. No? Okay. Ayan, so, ganun yung paglagay ha. Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, then 5, 6, 7, yung mga green. No? Okay, so, if you have a pair of electrons, no, sa ating Lewis dot structure, we call them lone pairs. No? So, meaning ng lone pairs is pair sila na lone. Meaning ng lone is separate na sila. Wala na silang pake sa isa't isa. No? That means they are not involved in bonding. No? That's why kanina sa ating example, yung halides, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, they are monovalent because only one electron, ito yung electron na yun, yung gagamitin sa bonding. Ano nangyari sa lone pairs? Sabi ko nga, no, pair na sila, no, masaya na sila sa isa't isa. So, wala na silang gagawin. No? Yung isa na lang yung maghahanap ng kapares. No? That means, it is monovalent na lang. No? Ito na lang yung gagamitin for bonding. But, yung lone pairs, hindi na. No? Wala nang pake yung mga lone pairs sa kanila. Okay? Nasundan po ba?
Yes po.
Ayun, sige. O, kayo naman, no? I want you to draw the Lewis dot structure. Siguro, ito, N, si Nicart, dito siya. Si Rika dito. O, diba, sakto? Dito si Nicart. Ito si, Nicart ulit to. Tapos ito si Rika. No? So, mamaya papakita nyo uli yung, yung Lewis dot symbols niya. Lewis dot structure. So, dali lang yan. So, I'll give you 2 minutes lang. Sige, go-off cam muna ako. O yan, no? I believe okay na kayo sa drawing. Sige. So, sino mauuna? Nauna si Rika kanina. So, si Nicart naman. Nitrogen and oxygen. Pakita mo na lang sa amin yung drawing. Ayan. So, for nitrogen, you have your 3 unpaired electrons and your 1 lone pair, no? So, that's why nitrogen is trivalent, no? The 3 electrons are used, no, in bonding. While yung lone pair, it doesn't participate that much, no? Okay, so sige. Oxygen, ayan, no? All the 6 electrons are placed around it, no? And it contains 2 lone pairs. So, tama yan. So, yan. So, thank you, Nicart. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sino next? Si Rika. Rika naman. Rika, okay na tayo dyan. Ay, Rika. Kumusta na si Rika? Rika, hello. Ayun na si Rika. So, for carbon yan, di ba? Ayun, no? So, ang mangyayari lang kay carbon, no? Siya kasi ay nasa group 4, no? So, dapat 4 na dots lang around carbon. So, yan. Sige.
Wait lang, sir.
Sige. Okay. Tayong 3 lang naman dito. By the way, no, wag natin isagad yung klase. Nagutom ako eh. Mamaya magugutom na ako. Pero ayun, no. Siguro we can end by 7:30. Or kung matapos na po, di sige. Worksheet na lang tayo sa Sabado. Practice activities mo. Tingnan natin. Ayan. So, tignan natin. Yan, si carbon, no? So, carbon has 4 valence electrons. Si sulfur, yan. So, 6 valence electrons, similar with oxygen. Okay, only yung for carbon, yung 4 valence electrons, they will be used in bonding. No? Meanwhile, for sulfur, similar nga kay oxygen. Yung dalawang lone pairs, they will not participate. The 2 other electrons, the 2 unpaired electrons will be used. No? So, yan. So, thank you, Nicart and Rika. So, salamat sa participation nyo. So, let's proceed, no? So, since we know how to, alam na natin, no, how to draw the Lewis dot symbols, pwede na tayo mag-draw ng basic Lewis structure, no? So, itong gagawin natin, mas simple siya compared to your inorganic chemistry or your Gen Chem. No? So, sa GenChem, may mga violations ng Octet Rule, so on and so forth. But for organic chemistry, medyo simple lang yung idea. So, in order for us to draw Lewis structures, number one, we draw first the Lewis dot symbols for each atom. Then, second na step is for you to pair those electrons. No? To pair yung isang electron sa kabilang atom. No? Para magkaroon sila ng bond. No? For example, we have ammonia. Yan, no? So, ito yung, ito yung Lewis dot symbol for nitrogen. Ito yung for hydrogen. Gagawin nyo lang, no, is that ipapalibot nyo. Okay? So, ipapalibot nyo yung hydrogens, no, para mag-bond sila. Mag-bond yung mga single electrons nila sa isa't isa, no. So, yan, no. As we do so, we form this structure, but pangit ng drawing dyan, no. So, ganito na lang, no. By doing so, no, soon as they share their electrons, they form chemical bonds. And remember na, always remember that each bonds contain two electrons, no. Yan. So yung dalawang electron, sila yung ginagamit to form the bonds, no. So yun yung drawing natin, no. So yun lang. And we can proceed, no. And by the way, no, bago tayo mag-proceed, no, before we see, no, kung before we know kung tama na yung nagawa natin or hindi, we can check the Octet Rule, no. Kung sa tingin natin tama yung ginawa natin, kung sa tingin natin mali yung nagawa natin, we can use the Octet Rule to verify that. So, how do we use the Octet Rule? So, ganito yung ginagawa ko for Octet Rule. I make boundaries, no. Paano yung boundaries, no? Kunwari, ito yung aking atom, no? I will make a boundary in such way that I will cover the shared electron, no? Meaning nun, yung boundary, papalibutan ko siya. Pero, pagdating sa bond, sasakupin ko siya ng isang buo. Ayan, no? So, I will make boundaries in which the shared electrons are enclosed, no? For hydrogens, ayan, no? Yun. Okay. Then, I check kung it followed the Octet Rule, no? By the way, for hydrogen, it doesn't follow the Octet Rule, no? Kasi, what do we know about hydrogen, no? Hydrogen, tingin tayo dito sa periodic table. The nearest noble gas kay hydrogen is helium. And ilang electrons meron si helium? Dalawa lang, no? Because it only requires 2 electrons to fully fill its 1s orbital, no? That means hydrogen only requires 2 electrons for it to be stable, no? Parang ma-follow niya yung octet rule niya, no? Pero doublet rule lang siya meron, no? So check natin. So si hydrogen, sabi ko kanina, it should contain up to 2 electrons na nakapalibot sa kanya. Bilangin natin, no? So, ito yung hydrogen. Ilang electron meron sa kanya? Isa, dalawa. Okay na yun, no? Ito rin, isa, dalawa. Isa, dalawa. So, what can we say is, ayun nga, no? There are 2 electrons shared with hydrogen. So, with that, no? It now assumes stable configuration, no? Ayan. Nagamit na niya yung binigay ni nitrogen na electron for it to be stable. So, wala na tayong issue with hydrogen. Ngayon naman, check natin si nitrogen, no? So, the same process, no? Gagawa ako ng circle na enclosed yung ends ng bonds, no? So, gagawa ako ng circle na sasakupin ko yung mga bonds na shinare ko sa kabilang atom. So, ayan yun. Okay. So, tingin tayo kay nitrogen. Ito yung periodic table. Sino yung pinakamalapit na noble gas kay nitrogen? That is neon. For neon kasi, no, it contains p orbital na. So, para siya ay maging stable, it should have 2s2, 2p, 6 electrons. No? Meaning lang nun, it should contain 2 plus 6, 8 electrons. Kaya octet, no? 8. So yun, for nitrogen and other elements na, it requires 8 electrons for it to be stable, no? So yun, so kailangan 8 electrons yung nasakop ng circle natin. No? Bilangin natin yung circle, electrons na nasa circle natin. So isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, lima, anim, pito, 8. So we now have 8 electrons around nitrogen. So we follow the octet rule. No? So that means for hydrogen, okay na yung kanyang octet rule, or I should say doublet rule, no? Kasi dalawa lang kailangan eh. For nitrogen, we fulfilled the octet rule, no? Kasi we have 8 electrons around it na. So with that, no, we can say that that is the final structure, no? Ayan na yung itsura ng structure niya. So that's the Lewis structure for ammonia or NH3. So, yan. So we can practice more, no? Siyempre, practice lang, no? Practice makes perfect, diba? So number 1, we're going to draw the Lewis structure of the following molecules. CH2O, no? CH2O. So anong gagawin? Number 1, you draw the Lewis dot symbol for each atom. C, may 4 na tuldok. H, may isa pang H, then may O pa. Ayan, no? Hindi kita yung tuldok, no? Teka lang. C, H, O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 na. Okay, so with all those in mind, no, ano na gagawin ko? I will arrange the molecule in such way that I can pair the electrons na, no. So, marami akong options na pwede gawin, no. Option 1, option 2, so on and so forth. Sige, so gagawa muna ako ng isang possible structure. Ano pwede ko gawin dito? So, pwede ko gawin si carbon, yan yung kanyang ano, valence electrons, idudugtong ko dyan si oxygen, no? Then yung hydrogens dito sa baba, no? So by doing that, ifo-form ko yung bonds. Ayan, pwede akong magawa ng double bonds, ha? Ayan. So for the first structure that I made, the Lewis structure would be this one. Ano pa yung mga pwede? So ano pa ba yung mga pwede gawin dyan? Ano pa kaya? Alam ko kasi yung structure na yun, no? Kaya ang hirap mag-isip ng iba pang pwede. So anyway, try natin, no? Try ko gawin yung magkakadugtong lang sila. H ko 1. Ito yung mga valence electrons nila. Okay, so tignan natin, no? Kung pwede yan, no? So pwede ko yan idugtong. In this case, no, kung mapapansin nyo, itong zoom natin. Itong mag-isang lone pair, pwede ko sila pagsamahin muna. Yan lang, for formality. So yan, yun yung mga posible, pero hindi natin sure kung tama na structures. Ay, wala na buro. So yan, ay, ba tayo na mag-zoom. So pinagsama ko lang yung dalawang magkahiwalay na electrons. Pwede naman yun. So, if that is my structure, ganito yung magiging drawing niya, no? Ayan. Uy, pwede naman pala i-drawing ng ganyan eh. Pero mamaya titignan natin kung tama o mali yung mga pinagagawa natin. Okay, so wala na akong maisip na ibang structure. Proceed na tayo in checking if tama yung drawing natin or mali. How do we check again if we drew the correct structure? Octet rule, no? Octet rule lang. Okay, so ano ginagawa? We make circles, no, encompassing all the bonds around the atom. No? So, yan. Ay, ba't blue? Ano ba yan? Ay, na. Green. So, yan. So, for this hydrogen, how many electrons meron dyan? Isa, dalawa. Okay na ba yung dalawa lang? Anyone? No. Pwede na ba yung dalawang electron for hydrogen? The answer is yes, di ba? Sabi natin kanina na for hydrogen to be stable, it only requires one more electron. Kasi si helium, dalawang electrons lang yung kaya niya. 1s2 lang yung kaya niya gawin. No? Pero yung iba na nasa baba na, it follows the octet rule. No? So yung hydrogen lang yung special. Kasi dalawa lang yung kaya. No? Say s orbital only contains one orbital and each orbital contains 2 electrons. So that means dalawang electron lang kaya niya. Unlike itong mga electrons sa baba, they really have to fulfill the octet rule na. So kailangan 8 na talaga. So as we can see dito, hydrogen contains 2 electrons already and that's okay na because ang kaya niya lang i-occupy ay up to 2 electrons na. Any questions? Okay pa naman.
Okay lang po.
Sige. So, review tayo ng Lewis structures. Na-discuss naman to ni Sir dati.
Yes po.
Ayun. So, pag nakalimutan, ito na siya. Inaaral na natin ulit. No? So, ito, check natin. It contains 2 electrons. Pwede na. Okay. So, ano susunod na i-check natin? Itong sa carbon. So, since si carbon, nasa baba na siya, no? Kailangan kumpleto yung 8 electrons, no? So, yan. So, yung orange circle natin, bilangin natin if 8 yung electrons na nandyan. Bilangin natin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, there are already 8 electrons around carbon. And that satisfies the octet rule kasi 8 eh. How about oxygen? So, anong ginagawa? Gagawa ulit tayo ng circle na sakop lahat. Lahat ng nakashare niyang electrons. So, ayan. So, hindi na siya circle. Pero yan, no? Tignan natin yung blue circle. And bilangin natin kung ilang electrons na meron dyan. Bilangin natin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 electrons then now for oxygen. So in summary, we have 2 electrons each for hydrogen. Okay yon. We have 8 electrons around carbon. Okay yon. And we have 8 electrons around oxygen. Okay yon. So this is the Lewis structure now because it follows the octet rule now. So yan yung Lewis structure ng formula na CH2O. Ano tong isang to? Check natin if possible to. Kayo, bigyan ko kayo ng chance, no? See if pwede itong structure na to, if it follows the octet rule, no? Or not. Sige, so anyone can can recite, no? Kahit share nyo, kwento nyo na lang kung kung bakit oo at bakit hindi siya pwede. Possible ba yung structure na yan for the same formula?
Hindi po.
Hindi po. Bakit kaya ni Cart?
Kasi po yung sa carbon po kasi, 'di ba, the nearest octet rule na fina-follow po doon is yung Ne na. Wherein dapat octet rule lang po yung fina-follow. But then again, yung kadugtong po kasi nung C is 6 na electrons lang po siya, which is 3 covalent bond lang. So kulang po ng isang pair bago siya makompleto yung octet rule.
Okay, so yun to. Tama yun, no? Kasi looking at carbon, if we draw its boundaries, no? And nag-draw tayo ng boundary, then we count the electrons contained in that circle, no? We can count 6 electrons lang, no? Okay sana dito, oh. Yan, dalawa yan, pwede yan. Okay sana dito, 8 yan. Dito, 2. But the problem is itong kay carbon, no? So, the carbon, ano nangyari? Electrons are not complete, no? It doesn't fulfill the requirements for the octet rule. Hence, we can say that this structure is wrong. This, however, is correct, no? Itong nasa left, no? So, that's how you predict Lewis structures, no? So, paano uli nagpe-predict ng Lewis structures? Number 1, draw the Lewis dot symbols. Ayan sila. Number 2, we pair the electrons now. We arrange the atoms in such way that the single electrons can pair up, no? So, yung mga single electrons, pwede natin dugtungin, no? In the form of chemical bonds. Then, after forming those bonds, no? We can draw circles, we can draw boundaries, and count if how many electrons are there, no, around sa isang atom, no. For hydrogen, that's always up to 2. For the rest of electrons, the rest of the atoms, kailangan 8 na, no. So yun, hydrogen and helium, 2 lang. Lithium, so on so forth, 8 na. So yun. So yun yung idea, no. Ay, so siguro, ito yung isa sa mga hate ng bata ko, yung pagdodrawing nito. No? But yun, okay naman sila after. Pasado naman. No? Mga senior high na. Kala nila kasi masaya yung drawing. No? So pagdating nila sa drawing, wala na. So yun. So anyway, I will give you another example. No? One last example maybe. Then I will give the rest to you as your assignment, no, or activity to do, no. You have to upload your answers on Canvas sa discussion page, no. Comment lang kayo doon. So, sige. So nasagutan ko to. Ano pa pwede sagutan dito? Ito, CH3OH, no. By the way, no, ang shortcut dito, alam mo yung shortcut dito? Kahit di na kayong magganito eh. Ang shortcut dito yung ginawa natin nung pinakauna. Ayan. Yan yung shortcut. Pero, yan, we're just looking at the basics again. Para lang makita natin na saan nanggaling yung mga yon. Dito po nanggaling sila. Pero kung hindi natin alam sila, no, yun, hindi natin alam yung mga shortcut na pinaggagawa natin kanina, then we can do this. No? Ay, ayoko yung 6, no? Kaya na bahala dyan. Ito naman, mas magandang example. Number 4, C2H2. Okay, so C2H2, dalawang carbon. Ang pangit ng tuldo. Carbon, that. Okay, so I will arrange my atoms in order na magkadugtong-dugtong yung mga bonds nila, no? So, I will try, no? So, sabi ko nga kanina yung technique, no? If may nakita kang dalawang carbon, pwede mo sila pagtabihin na. So, ganun yung gagawin ko. Yung hydrogens, always nasa dulo sila, no? So, ganun din yung gagawin ko doon. Okay, so after arranging my atoms in such way that I can maximize the spaces, no, to create the bonds, no. Ano na gagawin ko? Magdodraw na ako ng lines, connect the dots, no. Ginagawa natin to nung bata pa tayo. Until now, gagawin din natin yun. So, yan, connect the dots, no. Okay. So, by doing that, no, ano yung nagawa kong structure? So, H, single bond, carbon, then ilang bonds meron sa kabilang carbon? Bilangin natin, 1, 2, 3. So, may 3 bonds, no? Then, a single bond sa kabilang H, no? So, is this structure possible? Sige, kayo sumagot. Is that structure possible? Anyone can answer. Possible kaya yung structure? Does it follow the Octet Rule or not?
Possible po.
Possible kasi
Yung pinagkonektahan po kasi ni hydrogen and carbon is 1 bond, then yung dalawang magkatabi na carbon is 3. So, equivalent to 2, yung H at C, and then 6 for dalawang magkatabi na C. So, 8
okay.
yun.
So, yun. So, possible siya. Again, no, how do we check if possible? Gagawa ng boundary. No? Ayan. So, dalawa for hydrogens. Okay na yun. No? Ano pa? Itong carbon, sabi natin, sasakupin natin lahat ng dulo-dulo ng bonds. No? So, ayan. No? Bilangin natin yung electrons na yan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, 8. Octet. Nice. About this one, this carbon, sakupin natin yung mga share niyang electrons. Bilangin natin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, as you can see, all carbons follow the octet rule, and hydrogens, yan, nakuha niya yung dalawang electrons na kailangan niya. So, the structure is correct, no? And yun nga, emphasize ko lang dito that we can form multiple bonds, no? So, in chemistry, we can use multiple bonds, no? Pwedeng single bond, pwedeng double bonds, pwedeng triple bonds. Pero walang quadruple bonds, no? Iba na yun, no? Hanggang triple bond lang yung pwede. Okay? So, yun lang, no? So, do you need more examples pa? Or, okay na?
Okay na po.
Okay na. Si Rika.
Okay na po.
Okay na. Sige. So, siguro I want you to answer the rest of the items na lang. So, yeah. Okay, so one major thing that you have to remember in chemistry, or you have to know sa chemistry, is understanding the formal charges. So, what are formal charges? Remember that your atoms are bonded, no, with other atoms, no, in a covalent manner, no. Kasi 'di ba dalawa yung uri ng bonds? We have the ionic bond and the covalent bond, no. What we have for ionic bonds is that mayroong complete giving or taking ng electron, no. So, buong binibigay yung electron or buong tinatanggap, no. Kaya they possess the positive and the negative charge, no. But for covalent bonds, no, remember that the electrons are shared, not given. Pero there are instances na nagkakaroon ng charges yung atom sa isang molecule, no. Ang tawag natin sa charge ng isang atom sa isang molecule, we call them formal charges. That's different with the ionic charge, no? Kasi ionic charge tells you how many electrons yung binigay or tinanggap, no? Positive kapag nagbigay, negative if tumanggap, no? So, yun. For covalent bonds, no, we use the term formal charges in order to assign the charge of an atom in a covalent molecule, no? Okay, so, yan. Shared yung electrons, yes, pero pwedeng magkaroon ng partial charges, no? Mga positive and negative charges, depending on the electrons shared to them. So, how do we determine the formal charge, no? Madali lang yung formula. Fc equals should minus have, no? So, ano meaning ng should, no? When we say should, this pertains to the valence electrons. Ilan dapat yung meron siya? Andun yung term na dapat, no? What predicts yung, what predicts the dapat, no? Ano yung nagsasabi ng, dapat na electrons na meron siya? The valence electrons, no? Yung na-discuss natin kanina. So, yung should, this pertains to the valence electrons. Yung have, ito yung electrons that is shared to it, no? Yan. Ay, teka lang. So, anong gagawin natin dito, no? So, shortcut. Siyempre, mahilig tayo sa shortcut, no? So, ang ginagawa ko, you're given this structure. Ang ginagawa ko sa aking mga senior high, sabi ko sa kanila, i-box nyo yung atoms, no? Ayan, i-box nyo sila. Ayan, binox ko. Okay. Then after i-box, yun. Bahala na kayo sa buhay niyo. Hindi. Ganito, no? Remember that yung bonds, no? Di ba yung bonds, no? Na-form yan because of two electrons na shinare, di ba? So that means at each end of the line, at each end of the bond, may dalawang electron doon, no? So yan, emphasize natin in red dots, no? Okay. So yun. Ang reason why binox ko is that yung kasi, yung electrons na yan, di ba dalawa yan, di ba? They are equally shared, no? So shared sila sa bond, no? So that means sa isang pares, yung isa doon na kay carbon pa rin, yung isa doon na kay oxygen pa rin. So ganun. So ganun yung idea, ha. So sa isang bond, yung isang electron nandun sa kabila, yung isa nasa kabila pa rin, no? Dumadaloy nga lang sila, no? The electrons flow in that bond, no? So yun yung idea. The reason why pinutol natin is to see the actual number of electrons that is in the atom, no? So yun, puputulin natin yung bonds. That means yung dalawang electrons dito sa bond na to, yung isa mapupunta kay carbon, yung isa mapupunta kay oxygen. The same is true for this bond, no? Diba dalawang electrons yan? Mangyayari, pag nilagyan ko yan ng line, yung isa na kay hydrogen, yung isa na kay carbon. Yun, so same lang dito. Okay, so let's apply the equation should minus have, no? Isa-isa natin titignan yung atoms, no? Kung ano yung mga charges nila. Sige. Okay, so paano yung should, no? Tingin muna tayo dito kay hydrogen. So, ilang valence electrons meron dapat si hydrogen, no? Hydrogen should have how many valence electrons?
1.
1. So, that is 1 minus have. Ano meaning ng have? When we say have, yun yung dami ng electrons na nasa box. Ilang tuldok ang nasa box? Isa.
1.
Ayun, no? So, 1 minus 1, 0. So, hydrogen here do not contain charge. So, wala siyang formal charge. Edi good, no? Ito kaya. Itong nakaka-pointer, naka-laser. Ayan. Ano kaya formal charge niya? Hydrogen din yan, no? So, should
Same lang.
isa, have,
1 din.
isa din. Formal charge,
0
No,
po.
0. No.
so, no formal charge din to, no? Nice. How about this one? Ganon din, no? How about the carbon in the middle? Should minus have. Carbon
For
should, for,
valence electron.
have,
4 din po.
4 minus 4, 0.
0.
So, ayan. So, zero formal charge din kay carbon. So, ganun lang yung should minus have. How about oxygen here?
6 valence electron.
Sige. 6 valence electrons have
2.
2. Hindi, have.
1.
Bilangin natin. Isa, kasama yung lone pair sa pagbilang.
Ah.
Okay, so isa, dalawa, tatlo,
Tatlo.
4, 5, 6, 7. So there are 7 electrons in the box. No? So 7 yung have niya. 6 minus 7,
Negative 1.
negative 1. So ano meaning nun, no? So, the meaning is that oxygen possesses a negative charge, no? So, yun. So, yung negative yung characteristics niya. So, most likely, andun yung electrons, no? So, yun. Yun
Sir,
lang.
bali yung sa have, binibilang pa rin po yung valence electrons kasama na nung shinare sa kanya. Kaya
Yung ano
naging 7 po. Tama po ba? Yung sa have?
Yung 7. Bakit naging 7?
Opo.
Di ba po, ito. Di ba may 6, ano siya, may 6 electrons na hindi ginagamit, no? May 3 lone pairs siya. Tapos, di ba itong bond na to, sabi natin kanina, yung electrons dito, yung isa mapupunta kay carbon, yung isa mapupunta kay oxygen. That's why we created this separation sa box. So, if you're going to count kung ilan yung meron si oxygen, that includes the electron, no, na nasa bond, no? So, di ba 6 to? Plus itong hinati natin na bond, no? So, ganun.
Okay po.
Ayun. So, ganun ha. Itong bond na to, pinutol natin for the purpose na ma-split natin yung electrons na share nila. Just to count, for us to count the formal charge. No? So, yun. Any questions pa po? Marami pa tayong pwede pag-practicean dito. Okay pa naman kayo dyan?
Yes po.
Okay ka pa Rika dyan?
Opo.
Kaya pa naman. Ayun. So, dyan game pa lang siya. No? Pag org na bulaga. Okay. So, anyway. So, tignan natin, no? Practice pa tayong mga formal charges. No? Our activity now here is to see what are the formal charges of each atom in this drawing. No? Tignan natin kung ilan yung mga formal charge nila. Sige. Start tayo with number 1. So, ano yung gagawin ulit? Ano gagawin natin ulit? Maglalagay ng box. Box, putulin ng bonds. No? Pag na-practice nyo na to, kahit di nyo nalagyan ng box, no? Matik na yan sa utak nyo. No? Kumbaga, nakita nyo lang yung problem, letter C, agad yung sagot. Mga ganun. Okay. So, ano yung idea? We place box to break the bonds, no? Di ba, itong bond na to, this contains 2 electrons. So, the reason why we place that green box is para maghiwala yung dalawang electrons na yun. Yung isa andyan, yung isa andon, yung isa dito, yung isa andon, so on and so forth. Okay, so yun yung purpose why we drew boxes, no? To split the electrons na nasa bond. Then what's next, no? should minus have, no? Should, ilan yung valence electrons niya, as is, have, ilan yung nasa loob ng boxes, no? Including the lone pairs, no? Sige, so let's have this hydrogen, no? Okay, so ano yung formal charge niya? Itong hydrogen.
0.
0 po.
0 kasi should
1 electron.
1 electron have
1 din po.
ayun, isa lang kasi yung dot dun. So 1 minus 1 0.
0.
About this one?
Same lang po.
So 0, same lang. How about aluminum? Sige. Should. Ilan yun should ni aluminum?
4.
4. Anong group ni aluminum sa periodic table? Tingin
3.
tayo. Okay. So looking at this, no, aluminum is found at the third family, no. So that means it should contain 3
valence
electrons, no. So yan. So dapat 3 yan. Should 3 have
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Hindi, yung dots lang na nasa box.
Ay,
Yeah.
ano po? 4.
4. Okay, so for aluminum, that is should 3 valence electrons minus ilang dots meron sa box? 1, 2, 3, 4. So,
Negative 1.
Negative 1. Ayan. So, ganun na. So, yan. So, aluminum possesses negative 1 na charge. No? Anong blue na lang, no? So, lalagay ko yung negative 1 sa loob dito. Negative 1. So, yan. Let's try letter B. Ano yung unang gagawin?
Box po.
Box. Basta yun, no? Tapos, anong ginagawa ng box? It divides the electrons sa bond, diba? Diba dalawa yung electrons sa bonds, diba? Saan mapupunta yung isa?
Sa O na po.
Sa O and sa H, no? So, ganun yung purpose, no? Para mas ma-visualize natin, no? Pag na-master nyo na to, tititigan nyo na lang siya. Kahit wala ng box, no? Okay, so yan. So, naglagay tayo ng boundaries in order to visualize yung separation ng electrons sa bonds, no? So, dalawa yan. Yung isa napunta sa isa, yung isa napunta sa kabila, no? Okay, so should minus sub tayo. Hydrogen here, ilan yung kanyang formal charge?
0 po.
0 po.
0 kasi
1.
1 minus
1.
1. Hydrogen should have 1 valence electron. Ilang dots meron sa box? Isa lang. So, 1 minus 1, 0. How about this one?
Oxygen.
Ito.
Same.
Same lang din po.
Same lang din. Ito. Same.
Same lang po.
So, sulat ko. 0, 0, 0. How about oxygen? Should
6,
6 have
5.
5. Isa, dalawa, tatlong, apat, 5. So, ano yung formal charge niya?
1 po.
1 po.
1. Pag positive number, indicate natin yung positive. No? So, positive 1 yung kanyang formal charge. No? So, this molecule is positive, no, in charge. No? So, yun. Ayan, practice pa tayo. We have letter C. Anong unang gagawin?
Box.
Box, no? Tapos mamaya, yung pang-apat na sasagutan natin, hindi tayo mag-box. Mental lang. Basta ma-practice lang, no? Okay, so yan, na-box na natin sila lahat. Then, anong ginagawa ng box? They separate the electrons na ba sa isang band. So, usually, may dalawa dyan. Yung isa nandito sa kabilang box, yung isa nasa kabila. So, gagawin ko yan para sa lahat for us to visualize the electrons found, no, in those bands. Ayan. Sige. For all hydrogens, pare-parehas lang naman yan eh. What is the formal charge of all hydrogens? No?
0 po.
0 po.
Kasi
1
1
minus
should
1.
have
yung should isa have
1 din po.
1 din, no? So, ayun, no? So, we have no formal charge for hydrogen. How about carbon?
0 din po.
0
Zero
din. Kasi, should, apat.
Or
Have, apat
Or-
din. Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat. Dito din, isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, no? So, yun. So, 4 minus 4, 0. How about nitrogen here?
negative 1.
Negative 1. Bakit negative 1?
Kasi 5 po
5
yung
valence electrons. 6 po yung have.
6 yung meron. So, yan. So, 5 dapat kasi group 5 siya. However, we have here 6 electrons ito. Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, lima, anim. So, 5 minus 6, negative 1. So, I will write negative 1 kay nitrogen. So, ganun na. Medyo nasusundan na ba yung nangyayari?
Yes po.
Sige, ayan o, walang box-box. Sige. So, sige, walang box. Pwede naman line eh. Ayan. Tapos mamaya wala na talagang box, no? Wala nang lines. Mental na lang. Sige. Hydrogens. Ano yung kanilang formal charge?
0 po.
0. Bakit 0?
1 should, 1 have.
1 should, 1 have, no? Pakita pa rin natin yung dots, no? Para mas ma-visualize natin. So, ganun yung gawin nyo. Practice nyo na lang ito, no? So, yan. Para mas masaya ang buhay. So, yan. So, for all hydrogens, should 1, ilan yung have nila? Isa, isa, isa. So, 1 minus 1 is 0. So, okay tayo doon. So, 0 yung formal charge ni hydrogen. How about carbon?
6.
0 din po.
0. Bakit 0?
4 should, 4 have.
Or should, or have, no? Ayan, no? 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have double bonds, no? Ganun din naman. Every line contains 2 electrons. So, you just cut them. Yung isa dito, yung isa dun sa kabila. Yung isa dito, isa din sa kabila. Ganun. So, for carbon, 0. How about oxygen?
Negative 1.
Oxygen is
Negative 1 po.
negative 1.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Ilan yung should?
6.
Should, sorry,
6
6 pala. 1 lang pala.
Ayan. So, 1 lang na.
Skip 1.
So, yung should niya is 6. Have is
5.
5. So, yun, no? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 minus 5, positive 1. So, I will indicate the positive 1 charge, no? Kay oxygen. Ayan, no? More practice pa. Yung line sa baba, wala nang drawing, no? Sige. So, for letter E, sige, hindi ko na ilalagay yung dots, ha? Hydrogens.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hydrogens, formal charge is
0 po.
0. Should is 1. Have is
1.
1. Okay. So, carbon.
Should 4.
4 should,
5
5
have.
have. Negative 1.
Formal charge is
Negative 1.
negative 1. So I will indicate the negative 1 charge kay carbon. No? Okay na pala tayo, no? Sige. O, wala nang drawing. O, letter F. Sinong atom ang may formal charge? No? Which of those atoms will contain a formal charge and what is the formal charge?
Carbon po.
Carbon. Sige. So, si Rika, ano yung choice?
Ano yan, sir?
Sa letter F, sino yung may formal charge?
Si carbon po.
Carbon. Bakit?
4. May positive 1 po siya.
Positive 1 because
4 po yung should, tas 3 po yung have niya.
ayun. So, ganun yung idea, no? So, putulin natin yan. Isa. So, this is 1 minus 1, 0, 1 minus 1, 0, 1 minus 1, 0, and 4 minus 3, positive 1. So, I will indicate the positive 1 charge for carbon. Letter G. Sino-sinong atoms ang may formal charge and what are the formal charges of those atoms? Or isa lang pala yung atom na may formal charge dyan. What is the charge?
Oxygen po.
Ayan. Okay, so sino may formal charge?
Si oxygen po.
Oxygen, no? Okay, cut natin. Si carbon dito, this is 4 minus 4, no? Should 4 have ilan? Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat. So 4 minus 4 is 0. Wala siyang formal charge. Ito, ganun din dito, no? But for this part, this oxygen, should is 6, no? Have is ilan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 minus 5, positive 1. So I will indicate a positive 1 charge for oxygen. Ayan, very nice, no? Ayan, no? Para in the future, master nyo na siya, no? Kahit natutulog ka, kaya mo sagutan yun. No? Minsan sa sobrang bangungot ko sa chemistry, napapanaginipan ko siya. Nakatrauma. So, yun. Anyway, yan. Letter H, no? Sino yung may formal charge and ano yung formal charge?
Aluminum po.
Aluminum and
4, 5, 6. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chlorine yan sir, no?
Isang chlorine po.
isang chlorine and isang aluminum, no? So, box natin. Ay, hindi. Line na lang. Putol natin. Okay. So, for the terminal chlorines, meaning ng terminal nga sa dulo, no? So, ito, 7 minus 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 0 na to. 0 yan.
Opo.
Same is true for this one. 7, kasi group 7 siya. Tapos ilan yung meron siya? Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, lima, anim, pito. 0. Same is true for this one. 0 din yan. Ay, makakit siya. So 0 din. But looking at aluminum, what is the should for aluminum?
3 po.
3. Ilan meron siya?
4
Ilan
po.
sabi niya? 4. So 3 minus 4, negative 1.
1.
So negative 1. For chlorine naman na ito, that's should 7 have
6.
6. No? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. So 7 minus 6, positive
1.
1. Ayan. So Okay, ko na-master nyo na siya, no? Last one. Ay, salamat sa Diyos. Natatapos na tayo dito. Sige, letter I. May dalawang atoms dyan na may formal charge.
Yung terminal po ng oxygen and N, nitrogen ba yan, sir? Tama ba?
Mm.
Okay, so si nitrogen ay may formal charge na
Positive 1.
positive 1, yes. And sinong terminal oxygen? Double bond or single bond?
Yung
Single
single bond po.
Single bond. Ano yung charge niya?
Negative 1.
Negative 1.
1. So, yun. Very nice, no? So, congratulations. So, that's how we understand formal charges, no? So, ayun yung progression natin, no? From boxes, naging lines na lang, then wala na. So, yun. So, I hope, no, that you will still retain that idea in the future kasi magagamit na naman uli natin yan, no? Especially when we do the chemical reactions. No? So, do you have any questions for now?
Wala po.
Wala na. Okay pa naman tayo, Rika?
Opo.
Okay tayo, Ricardo. Sige.
Yes po.
Hindi natin ito tatapusin lahat na. Para may gawin tayo sa Sabado. Tsaka hindi rin natin ubusin yung time. Grabe naman yung 8:30. Para makakain na rin tayo. Okay. So, yan. Electronegativity. No? So, when we say electronegativity, this is the tendency of an atom to attract electrons. The question is why? Bakit kaya kailangan niya ng electrons? Ba't kailangan manghila? Di ba siya masaya sa sarili niya? Okay. So, the answer there lies on the periodic table again. Tingin ulit tayo sa periodic table. Looking at the periodic table, ano yung gusto ng, kunwari kayo, anong gusto niyo sa buhay? Ako gusto ko maging stable. Yung molecules, the reason why they form is that because they want to be stable. For atoms, yun din kaya yung gusto nila. Yun din, no? So, when we say the atoms are stable, what we are pertaining to is that they are stable in a sense that they follow. Sino ba yung pinaka-stable dito sa lahat ng elements na nandito sa periodic table? Sino yung pinaka-stable dyan? Yung mga walang baki sa ibang atoms. Sino dyan sa 8 groups na yan?
8.
Yung group 8, no? Ito yung idol nila. Ito yung Lodi cakes nila, no? Lod's idol, not Lodi cake, no? So, noble gases are the ultimate goal of those atoms, no? Para yun yung gusto nila gayahin. That's why we have Octet Rule nga. Diba sabi ko sa inyo kanina, Octet Rule kasi itong group na to, except for helium, no? They contain complete electrons, no? Sa S and P orbitals, no? That's why they have 8 electrons, no? 2 sa S, 6 sa P, no? So, ganun yung idea. They want to imitate the electrons dito, no? Na kumpleto sila ng electrons, di ba? So, the question there is, paano nila gagawin yun, no? Paano nila makukuha yung electrons, no? Para maging noble gas configuration sila or para maging stable sila. The answer there is electronegativity, no? Because sabi nga natin in a chemical bonds, no, may sharing ng electron pero naghihilahan yan, no? The most electronegative atom will pull the electrons much stronger than those atoms that are not that electronegative, no? And maghihilahan sila ng electrons just in order to reach the stability or just to reach the noble gas configuration. So, ano uli yung reason why we have electronegativity? The reason why we have electronegativity is that that atoms loves electrons, no? Because if they attract more electrons into them, if marami silang hinilang electrons papunta sa kanila, they achieve the noble gas configuration, no? That's why, look at the trend, no? The electronegativity increases from left to right. Kasi nasan ba yung noble gas? Nandito sa rightmost side, di ba? Nandito sila. Kaya kung mapapansin nyo, ayan, no, si lithium, wala siyang pake. Pero as you go towards fluorine, tumataas yung electronegativity because malapit na siya sa noble gas, no? So, gustong-gusto niya maging noble gas. So, malakas yung tendency niya to attract electrons. However, the trend is in a in vertical axis, no? The trend is from bottom to top, tumataas, no? The reason is that if the electron is super big na kasi, for example, for bromine, for chlorine, masyado na malaking electrons. Bakit malaki na yung electrons? Bakit malaki yung atoms pala? Malaki na yung atoms kasi sobrang dami na ng electrons, no? They still have the tendency to abstract, to get or to attract electrons, pero not that much kasi malaki na sila, no? Kumbaga, si fluorine, ito yung bata na gusto sa kanya lahat. Pero habang tumatanda ka na, wala ka nang pake na. So, ganun na. Habang lumalaki ka na, you don't care that much, no? Pero you still have the tendency to abstract electrons. So, that's why, no? So, using the idea of electronegativity, no, we can actually determine where the electrons are in a molecule, no? Kasi remember, sabi natin, electronegative atoms abstracts electrons. They attract electrons, no? Hinihila nila yung electrons toward them. Looking at our molecules, no, may mga electronegative atoms dyan. Meron ding hindi masyado. Okay? So, the idea is that in those molecules, no, the electron flows through the bonds, no, towards the atom that is electronegative, no? Pupunta yung mga electrons, pupunta dun sa atom na pinaka-electronegative sa molecule, no? Through the chemical bonds, no? Okay. So, with that, no, with the idea of electronegativity, we can have these three types of bonds, no, depending on the differences ng electronegativity. So we have three major types of bonds. We have the covalent bond, no, the polar covalent bond, and the ionic bond, no. So what are these three, no? So let's start with covalent bond. Ano lang kwento nito, no? So these are covalent bonds, so electrons are shared, no? But the electronegativity difference is negligible. It is below 0.5, no? So, meaning nun, wala naman silang masyadong difference, no? So, wala silang pake. So, that means yung electrons, wala lang. Hindi sila dumadaloy kung saan-saan. Steady lang sila. No? Chillax, no? For example, for carbon-carbon, yung electrons dito sa carbon-carbon, itong bond na yan, no? Ano ba yung electronegativity ni carbon? 2.5, no? So, ang electronegativity ni carbon na to is 2.5. Ganon din dito sa carbon na to. Carbon din yan, no? So, saan pupunta yung electrons dyan? Wala silang pupuntahan, no? Kasi wala namang difference yung dalawa. There's no subtle difference, there's no obvious difference dito. So, that means the electrons are just moving around the bonds, no? In peace, no? So, walang nangihila sa kanila. So, kapag ganon, we have covalent bond. CH, no? The CH bond. Tingin tayo. Carbon is 2.5, hydrogen is 2.1. So what is the difference? 0.4. So that difference doesn't matter that much, no? Hindi naman ganun kalaki, no? So, we will not observe that this bond is polar. When you say polar, nasa isang side yung electrons, sa kabila wala. Hindi natin na-observe yun dito. Kasi yun nga, sabi ko, the electronegativity difference is subtle. Maliit lang, hindi siya obvious masyado. So, the electrons will not transfer fully into the other side. Polar covalent bond, on the other hand, ito na yung may noticeable difference. No? May medyo malaking difference na sila in terms of electronegativity. But still, they are covalently bonded. No? Covalently bonded. For example, and yung pinaka gamit na bond sa atin would be the CO bond, no? Carbon and oxygen bond. No? Looking at carbon, that's 2.5. Oxygen, that's 3.5. No? So, what will happen? No? So, si carbon, this is 2.5 in electronegativity. Oxygen is 3.5 in electronegativity. The idea is that yung oxygen, hihilahin niya yung electrons ni carbon. Kasi mas electronegative siya. Okay, so mas gusto niya yung electrons na sa kanya, so it will pull the electron density towards itself. No? And as we do that, no, as the electrons move towards the side, no, nako-concentrate yung electrons doon. No? And what do we know about electrons? They are negatively charged particles, di ba? So what happens is that for the oxygen part, nagkakaroon dito ng negative particles. No? Dumadami yung negative particles, giving it this partial negative charge. No? Meaning yan partial. Partial negative charge, no? Bakit may partial negative charge? Andun kasi yung electrons most of the time, no? So, nandun sila nagkukumpulan, lahat ng nega nandun. So, may nega talaga yung per side na yun, no? On the other hand, for carbon, dito, nababawasan yung electrons, no? So, there is a deficit on the electron density. So, in the lack of negative charges, there exists the positive charges. No? That's why for carbon, partial positive yung charge niya. For oxygen, that is partial negative. No? So again, bakit may ganun? No? So may ganun because there is a noticeable difference in the electronegativity. Electronegativity difference is 1, and that is within the range of 0.5 and 1.7. No? So, noticeable yan. So, what will happen is that since, napansin ng electron, malaki na yung difference, lipat tayo dun. No? So, lumipat sila kay oxygen. And as they do so, they concentrate the oxygen side with electrons, and that will give it a partial positive charge. Sa kabila na nawalan, positive na siya. Ay, partial negative. Ano ba sinabi ko? Yun. Kung nasan yung electrons, dito yung partial negative. No? Sa nawalan, andun yung partial positive. No?
Sir, saan po ulit nakukuha yung 2.5 tsaka 3.5?
Dito sa table. No? Ayan.
Okay.
Hindi nyo siya kakabisaduhin na. Ako hindi ko kabisado eh. Tsaka nasa periodic table din siya. Ito yung mga electronegativity. Pero even without the number, no, we can get an intuition kung asan papunta yung electrons. No? Because we have the periodic trends, di ba? Pag left to right, the electronegativity increases. From bottom to top, the electronegativity increases. So kahit wala tayong table, even if we don't have the numbers with us, no, we can get an idea on who among those atoms are the most electronegative. So, but if the the electronegativity difference is big, no, in a sense na greater than 1.7 na siya, yung difference nilang dalawa, you form the ionic bond, no, wherein the bond can no longer sustain, no. The bond can no longer exist, no. Kasi the atom is abstracting all the electrons. Yun, hinihila na niya lahat ng electrons na nasa bond, no? Kaya maski yung bond, hindi na niya kaya mabuo, napuputol siya. Pag naputol yon, you form your ions, no? Okay. So, saan nakikita to? Mostly, ionic bonds, meron dyan, you have your metal and your non-metals, no? So, yun. So, madali na lang yan tignan, no? If nakita mo, may metal dito. Kasi ito non-metal to. Ionic bond agad yan, no? So, yun. Even without the idea on what is the actual electronegativity difference, no? Basta yun lang yung shortcut. If you have a metal paired with non-metal, ionic bond yun. If you have non-metals bonded, you can either have covalent or polar covalent bond depending on the strength of the electronegativity, no? The tendency of those atoms to pull out the electrons, no? Any questions? Okay naman tayo dyan.
Okay naman po.
Okay naman tayo dyan, Rika.
Sir, yung sa may partial po na may positive tsaka negative, ano po yun ulit?
Meaning lang nito, no? Kasi, di ba sabi natin kanina, if you have noticeable electronegativity difference, meaning medyo malaki na yung difference nila, yung electrons, nadadama din yun. They feel it, no? So, what happens is that yung electron, they will go to the side that is more electronegative. So, yun. Ito. Kunwari, ito yung electrons. Pupunta sila sa oxygen kasi mas electronegative si oxygen. Kapag marami na yung electrons dito sa side na to, ano nangyayari? Marami ng negative. So, what will happen? This side becomes negative, no? Or partial negative. Negative siya kasi maraming negative particles. On the other hand, yun sa side naman na walang electrons, yung nilayasan ng electrons, doon nagiging positive, no? So, yun.
Okay.
Okay tayo dyan. Note nyo na lang, no? Note nyo siguro. Pag partial negative, andun yung electrons. Tapos, saan yung electrons? Nasa electronegative atom. So, ganun. So, ayun. Ano to? Ganun din to, no? So, yan, no? We have here carbon-carbon. Ano alam natin? These are the same atoms, so the electronegativity difference is 0, no? So, this is a covalent bond, no? So, covalent bond lang to. For this one, carbon and oxygen bond, no? Oxygen is more electronegative than carbon according sa periodic trend, no? So, papunta lahat ng electrons kay oxygen. So, pag nakay oxygen na yung mga electrons, oxygen will now bear the negative charge, no? The partial negative charge. Yung nawala ng electron, that will be the partial positive charge naman, no? Partial positive side. Ito naman, if you have metal and non-metal, ano mangyayari? Yung electrons, ibibigay na lang ni metal kay non-metal. That's why yung metal natin, they are always positive in charge. Non-metals are negative, no, in charge. So, this is polar, this is covalent, polar covalent, and metallic bond, ionic bond pala. So, yun. Yun lang. So, ito yung electronegativity difference, no? So, you have your typical bonds here. Okay, di nyo na ito kabisaduhin, no? Huwag nyo na kabisaduhin. Just know the periodic trends lang. So, you have to remember this trend, no? Soon as you remember, soon as alam nyo na yan, no? Good to go na tayo. Sige, so let's have this, I think this will be our, final activity for this day. Kasi ang haba pa pala ng isa. Ay, ang haba nga. Nakailang slides na ba tayo? Sige, so anyway, tuloy lang muna tayo. Sige. So, we have the following structures now. Our task is to identify if there are any polar covalent bonds, no? And we're going to indicate them using partial positive and partial negative symbols in the appropriate location. So, let's start with letter A. So, ano lang meaning nun, no? Sabi ng problem, maglagay daw tayo ng partial charges dun sa side na may electron, no? Or wala. So, ano yung mga uri ng bonds na meron tayo? Lilista natin, no? So, we have the CH bond. Ano pa? CO bond and CC bond. So, yan yung tatlong bond na meron tayo. Okay, assess natin. Sa tatlong uri ng bonds na meron sa ating molecule, ito yung mga CO, CC, CH, 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 no? So, yun yung mga types ng bonds na meron dito. Okay. Ano gagawin natin dyan? So, assess natin if itong tatlong bonds nito, sino yung polar, sino yung hindi, no? CH, polar, non-polar. CH, polar, non-polar.
Non-polar.
Non-polar. Okay, one proof is that yung electronegativity difference, di ba? For CH, carbon is 2.5, hydrogen is 2.1. Subtract natin yan, 0.4. Sabi natin, a bond is non-polar if the difference is less than 0.5. So, 0.4 to. So, non-polar yan. So, lagay ko NP, non-polar. Sige. CC, polar, non-polar, ionic.
CC. Non-polar.
Bakit siya non-polar?
Below 0.5?
Yes. Tsaka yung difference na lang ng electronegativity. Same atom to di ba?
Apo.
So, 2.5 minus 2.5, 0. So, walang difference. No? So, this is non-polar. How about CO?
Polar.
This is polar, no? Because oxygen is more electronegative than carbon, no? Pwede rin natin yan i-solve dito. CO. So, oxygen is 3.5. 2.5 si carbon. Subtract natin yan. 3.5 minus 2.5, 1. Sabi natin kapag ang difference ay 0.5 to 1.7, ano yan? Polar. So, polar yung CO. So, ang gagawin natin, we will focus on the CO bonds, no? Focus tayo dito. Ay, sumobra. Focus tayo sa mga CO bonds. So, ganun yung technique, ha? Lista nyo yung types ng bonds. Then, once you are able to identify kung nasan yung polar bond, dun tayo mag-focus. CO bond, to CO din, to CO, to CO. Sige. Ngayon, maglalagay na tayo ng charges. We will assign the charges, no? Na kanina yung partial negative. Na kay carbon, na kay oxygen. Bakit?
Ay, partial negative po yun sa oxygen.
Bakit kay oxygen?
Kasi mas marami po siyang electronegativity.
Mas electronegative si oxygen kaysa sa carbon.
Or-
Diba? Remember the periodic trend, di ba? Oxygen is at the right side, at the rightmost side compared to carbon. So yun na lang, yun yung idea. Si oxygen mas electronegative kaysa kay carbon. So gagawin natin doon, since we know that oxygen is electronegative, we will write the symbol partial negative. Partial negative. Paano dinodrawing yung partial? Parang 8 lang yan, pero hindi kompleto yung 8. Ganon. That is a Greek symbol, delta. Small letter na delta. Same capital ganyan eh. And small ganyan. So anyway, so yun. So for oxygen, that will bear the partial negative charge because it is more electronegative. How about carbon? Hindi kung may negative,
Positive na po.
partial positive siya. No? So, ganun, partial positive kay carbon, partial positive sa kanya rin, and sa kanya rin. So, that's how we predict, no, where are the electrons, no, located, no. So, alam natin na kay oxygen siya kasi si oxygen ay electronegative compared to carbon, no. Yan. So, ano yung steps na ginawa natin? List down all the types of bonds. After that, identify if sino yung polar, sino yung non-polar. Once na-identify nyo na yung polar bond, you can assign the charges. No? Assign negative to the most electronegative and partial positive sa least electronegative. No? Nasundan po ba?
Yes po.
Si Rika. Okay pa dyan, Rika?
Medyo, sir.
Ang dami na, no? Ang dami ng ideas, no? Parang, bulaga. Parang kanina, ano lang tayo, Drawing. Ngayon, may ganito na, no? So, yan. Practice pa tayo, no? Bigyan ko pa kayo ng example. Siyempre, mastery lang yan, no? Practice. Okay, so ano yung unang gagawin for letter B? Identify the bonds, no? Ano yung uri ng bonds? I have CH, ano pa? CCl, and CF. Without looking at your electronegativity table, sino sa tatlo ang polar bond? Sige, sino sa tatlong bond ang polar bond? Yung CH, alam na natin yan eh. Kasi nilista na natin yan kanina, di ba? CH is non-polar. Sinolve na natin yan kanina. How about CCl and CF?
Polar po.
Polar yung?
CCl. And CF po.
Tama naman. Yan. Polar CCl and polar CF. Para mapatunayan natin, balik tayo dito sa table. Prove lang natin yung difference, no? Diba kapag less than 0.5 and greater than pala yan.
Sir,
Less than 0.5.
Kailangan pa pareho. Kabisado yan?
Hindi naman. Ano lang siya. Ginagamit ko lang to just to prove. Pero in the future, no, hindi na natin gagawin tong 0.5, something, no. Ano na yan eh. Parang pag alam na natin tong topic na to, matik na sa utak natin na, ay, ito negative to, ito positive to. So, ganun, no. Pero prove lang natin, no. So, if less than 0.5, non-polar. If 0.5 to 1.7, polar. And anything greater than 1.7 is ionic, no. So, tignan natin yung Cl. 2.5 si carbon. Cl is 3.0. So, 3.0 minus 2.5, 0.5 polar. Cf. So, sa Cf, 2.5 minus 4 equals 1.5 polar. Okay, so, yun. Yan yung proof, no? So, pwede natin gawin yan, pero mas maganda yung alam na natin yung periodic trends, no? Na we don't have to look at this table just to get an idea kung sino yung polar or not, no? Pero yun, if you want, okay lang. No? So, yun yung idea. Okay, so in summary, we realized that CH is non-polar, CCl is polar, CF is polar. Ang question, sino yung partial negative? Dito sa CCl, sino yung partial negative?
Cl po.
Cl. Kasi siya yung mas electronegative, no? So that means in this bond, I will assign Cl the partial negative charge, no? Partial negative. That means si carbon partial positive. How about the CF bond? This bond. Sino yung partial negative?
F.
Si F, no? So F is partial negative. That means the carbon is still partial positive, no? So ganun lang yung pag-assign. So sasagot pa tayo. Ito, number 3, last kong sasagutan. Then, kayo na bahala sa DEF. No? Tapos, break time na natin. Next meeting na lang yung natira. No? So, yun. Okay. So, for letter C, ano yung types ng bonds na meron tayo? CH,
CMG,
carbon magnesium,
MgBr.
yan. So, we have 3 types of bonds. Without looking at the electronegativity table, sino yung polar, sino yung non-polar? Merong ionic dyan. Pero yung for the sake of simplicity na lang, yung ionic ko consider natin as partial positive or partial negative na lang. Yung CH, alam nyo na non-polar yan. Kanina pa siya non-polar. Yan o. Diba? So, it is your task to check kung ano si CMG and MgBr. No? Sige.
Sir, parehong polar.
Parehas po na?
Polar po.
Parehas na polar. Sige. Totoo naman. So, si CMG, polar to. MgBr, polar din, pero ito yung actually ionic. Actually, ito din, ionic yan. Di ba sabi ko kanina, if you have a metal bonded with non-metal, you have ionic bond. No? Si Mg kasi, metal to. Di ba? So, etong C and Br, non-metal yan. So, this is metal. This is non-metal. Metal, non-metal. So, ano yung alam natin, no? Kapag metal, positive yung charge parate. Yun agad yung isipin natin na pag metal, positive charge. So, positive tayo kay Mg. For Br and C,
Negative.
sila yung non-metal, negative yan. So, ganun yung idea.
Br negative.
Okay tayo doon.
Yes po.
Sige. So, we need more reinforcements, no? Ito na naman yung last Kasi yung susunod dyan, atomic orbitals, more on shapes, no? which is next meeting na lang, sa Sabado na lang. Gutom na rin ako eh. So we will end by 7:30. No? But for the meanwhile, no, I want you to answer the remaining 3 questions. No? So, number 1, identify the bonds. Number 2, uh, check if the bond is polar or not. Then, yun, assign the charges. No? So I will give you 5 minutes to do that, no? By 7:20. We will sum up everything. We will answer the question, sum up everything, and kain na tayo. Ilang hours na tayo nagkakwentuhan? 2:45. Mas nakakapagod yung online class kaysa sa no? Face to face. But anyway, kaya natin yan. Wala tayong choice. Sige. Answer DEF. Identify the bonds. Identify whether they're partial. I mean polar or non-polar. Then you assign the charges. Okay. sige. Check na tayo. Okay na ba tayo dyan? Who can answer letter D? No? Pakita na lang sa screen kung ano yung answer. No? Letter D. Letter D, no? Para, just check na lang natin sa screen. No? Pakita niyo yung sagot. Ayan, letter D. Sige. Nagugutom na ba kayo?
Sir, medyo nalilito ako dun sa paglagay ng partial.
Saan banda?
Yung paglalagay po ng positive tsaka negative po.
Yung negative, ilalagay mo siya doon sa mass electronegative, no, na atom. Meaning ng mass electronegative, kung titignan mo yung periodic table, nasa rightmost side siya. For example, carbon and oxygen. Tingin tayo dito. So, si oxygen nasa right side compared kay carbon. Ibig sabihin, mas negative si oxygen kaysa kay carbon. So, kay oxygen yung negative. Ganon. Okay na tayo doon, Rika?
Opo.
Sige. No, always yung negative dun sa atom na electronegative, no? Okay na tayo dyan. Kumusta na tayo dyan, guys?
Sir, ang hirap i-drawing, pero alam ko na yung sagot.
Hindi ko po alam kung tama yung akin.
Sige. Pakita ko na lang, tas check, sabihin nyo na lang kung tama or mali na. Okay, so for letter D, we have here CH, ano pa? OH, and CO bonds. No? CH, non-polar to. Kanina pa siya, nalitaw na. So, non-polar talaga yan. OH is polar. CO is polar. Ito yung kanina pa din, no? So, yun. So, OH is polar. CO is polar. Ano pa ba? CC pa pala.
Sir, di
CC.
kasama yung CC?
Ayan, kasama na siya. Yung CC, non-polar din. Ay, yun. Teka lang. Yung pusa. Yung pusa binaba yung mic. Ano ba yan? Ka dito. Ayan siya. Babaga. Ayan. So, yan. So, apat na bonds yung meron tayo. CH, non-polar. OH, polar. CO, polar. CC, non-polar. Okay. So, ngayon, let's look at OH and CO. Sa OH, ang pinaka-electronegative is ano?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. So, oxygen would be the partial negative, partial positive, si hydrogen. How about CO bond?
CO. Partial negative po yung oxygen.
And partial
positive.
Carbon. So, to write the partial charges, sulat ko ha. Okay. Partial positive for H, partial negative for O, partial positive kay C, partial positive kay C dyan, partial negative kay O dyan, partial positive kay H, partial positive kay C dyan, partial negative kay O, and partial positive kay H. No? Ilan yung tinama natin? So, ilan to? Bilangin natin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, sa 9 na charges, tama lahat?
Yes po.
Okay. So, okay kay ni Card. Si Rika.
May hindi po ako nalagyan yung gitna po na si.
Ay, ito. Okay, so, siguro ito lang nakita na. Pero yan, nakasama din siya. Sa CO bond siya. Pero the rest, tama.
Opo.
Ayan, very good, no? So, yun. So, ganun lang. Sa ngayon lang tayo medyo
Bali,
ganito.
sir, kapag nalagyan na yung isa, tapos kapag kapareho naman sila ng bond, like for example, dun sa CH, hindi na po kailangan lagyan ng label pa, no po? Opo.
That din. Ang focus lang natin yung polar bonds, no? Ito yung mga polar bonds. Ay, highlight natin. Ito yung mga focus natin, no? Ayan, ayan, ayan. Ay, hindi pala yan. Ay, wala. Ewan ko pa. Gutom na ako eh. Sana kayo din nagugutom na. Eraser. Burahin ko lang to. Ay, hala. No. Bura. Ayaw mag-zoom. Ayaw. So, focus lang natin na partial positive. So, ano yung mga focus natin na bonds? Ito lang. Yung mga yan, no? Yung mga yan, no? Ay, ba't ko hinighlight yun? Hindi to kasama. Red ko. Hindi yan kasama. So, yan, no? So, ganun lang, no? We just look at the polar bonds, then we indicate kung sino yung partial negative and partial positive. Okay, so good start, no? Letter E, ano yung mga bonds natin? So, we have CO, polar yan. Sagot na natin yung kanina. We have CC, non-polar yan. And CH, polar. No? So, yan. Nangyayari sa computer ko. So, anyway. So, sa CO bond, nasagot na rin naman natin kanina, negative si oxygen, positive si carbon. So, we have this partial positive for carbon, partial negative for oxygen. Yun lang. So, this time, okay tayo sa dalawa.
Yes po.
Yung
Ayun.
hydrogen pa ata, sir. Yung hydrogen, sir, di ba lalagyan pa rin?
Itong CH bond, non-polar kasi siya eh.
Okay. So, yung
hindi na siya
polar
kasama.
lang. Okay
Ito
po.
lang CO. Yun.
Pag non-polar, wala pong nakalagay.
Wala pong nakalagay.
Okay,
Ang
okay.
meron lang yung polar.
Okay po.
Ayun. So, yan. Last one. Ang merong tayong bond dito ay CCl. Polar yan. Ang tanong, na kanino yung partial negative?
CL po.
Cl. So, partial negative Cl, partial positive carbon. So, partial positive kay carbon, then the rest of the Cl would there be partial negative charge. Yan. At this time, okay na tayo sa drawing. Nalagyan lahat ng charges.
Opo.
Yun. So, yun. Yan lang. So, I think that's all for today.
Sir, wait lang. Picture lang ko lang.
Sige. You can take screenshots, no? And, ayun. After this discussion, no? Since this is recorded naman, after ma-process ng Microsoft Teams, you can rewatch what we did. So, 3 oras kayong manonood ng ano. Ang ginagawa ko, minsan ako nanonood din ng ginagawa ko. Pina-fast forward ko na lang. 1.25 na speed. Mabilis yung kwento. Yun. Do you have any questions po?
Wala po.
So, yun. So, siguro, your task would be to practice on answering these problems. No? Itong mga problems din na to, no? Then, by weekend, magbibigay pa ako ng worksheets na hindi naman recorded, no? Pero, we will find it useful, no? To further understand our lesson. No? So, titignan ko pa rin yung answers nyo, pero hindi siya graded. No? So yun, just for the sake na natutunan natin, no? So yun. So with that, no? So we're done with the first part of our first chapter. On the second part of our chapter, discard ko na, no? So we will discuss atomic orbitals, pero ito mabilis lang to, no? Chika-chika lang yan ng ano, shapes. So with that, no, siguro, if you have any questions, no, meron pa ba o wala na? May questions pa po ba tayo?
Wala na po.
Wala
Wala
na.
na po.
Sige. So yun na, yung materials nasa canvas naman. If you want to revisit our discussion, you can find the the video dito sa link na to. No? So access nyo na lang siya after siguro mga 2 hours, mapaprocess na yung video. So yan, so with that na, so thank you for participating, no? And hopefully in the future okay yung ating discussion. So thank you very much po, and I'll see you on Saturday. So,
Thank you,
sige.
Thank
sir.
you po.
At end, kain na tayo ng dinner. Gugutom na. Sige, so salamat and see you on Saturday. Good luck sa ibang classes. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye
po.
po.
Bye po.